All right, well, we're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 tonight. So the last time we were together in here preaching, I started preaching Ecclesiastes. And I'm not saying I'm going to preach through the whole book of Ecclesiastes. I'm going to preach until God tells me to do something different, you know. But we are on chapter 2 tonight. We did chapter 1. Ecclesiastes can be a depressing book. It's one of those books that you really shouldn't. No, I'm not going to say that. If you're depressed when you read it, you may end up more depressed after you get through reading it. It's one of those that you really have to get to the end of the book to really understand the meaning of it. It's kind of like Job. You know, you can't read part of Job and really understand it. You have to read to the end of it, and then, you know, if you're not really spiritually mature, you may not get the full meaning of it then. I was thinking, you know, I was looking over kind of what I had preached the last 2 or 3 weeks, Sunday morning and Sunday night, and I was thinking tonight, like, I bet people think I'm really depressed. Because, you know, we're world war, and you know, I'm really not. I mean, things are clicking along pretty good. I'm happy and joyful, but I mean, it seems like some of my Sunday morning sermons have seemed heavy to me. I don't know if they seem heavy to you or not, but they seem heavy to me. And then we come back Sunday night, you know, and we don't get happy, clappy, joyful. We get Ecclesiastes, who's trying to, you know, figure out what's the meaning of life. And he goes all the way around the barn to finally get the answer by the end of the book. Ecclesiastes, we're going under the assumption that King Solomon wrote that. Reason being because the author describes himself as being king in Israel and the son of David. So, you know, by process of elimination, that sort of narrows it down for us to King Solomon. There's some debate among scholars as to whether that's who really wrote it or not, but I don't see good reason to deny that, and so that seems to be the author, and certainly what we're going to look at tonight would fit King Solomon to a T. Last week was church picnic. The last time when we looked at chapter 1, Solomon calls himself the preacher in the book of Ecclesiastes. He sets out to try to find the meaning of life. And so last time he does that through searching out the depths of wisdom. He tests out wisdom. And if you know the story of King Solomon, when he first becomes king, God appears to him in a vision and says, I'll grant you any wish. You tell me what you want, and I'll give it to you. And he says, well, Lord, I really just, would love to have wisdom to lead this people of yours that you put me in charge of. And that seemed like that pleased God. So God granted him wisdom, and he was the wisest man on the earth. And so he takes this vast amount of wisdom, knowledge that God has given him. And in chapter 1, he sets about to try to use that to find the meaning of life. What is the purpose of life? And at the end of the day, at the end of chapter 1, he comes back to say it's all folly. It's all meaningless. It's empty. It's like striving after the wind. Wisdom just for wisdom's sake, if it doesn't lead you to God, is meaningless. It's without purpose. And so last time we talked about the folly of wisdom. So in chapter 2, he's going to switch gears. He's going to say, okay, that didn't work. So now let's try what the world says the purpose of life is. Now, what does the world say the purpose of life is? More stuff, right? What is it that the world would say life is all about? More stuff. He who dies with the most toys wins. So get out there and get as many toys as you can, is the idea. And he is going to go through this whole deal of chapter 2, exploring all the different ways of having stuff and pleasure and folly. And so he is going to now switch gears from wisdom, and he's going to move towards folly, and he's going to test out that theory. Okay, I tried wisdom. That doesn't seem to be the purpose of life. Now let me go the other direction and test out folly. And at the end of the day, he's going to come back to the same conclusion that that's empty and meaningless as well. And so last time, the folly of wisdom. This time, the folly of folly. All right, let's take a look at verse 1 of Ecclesiastes chapter 2. I said in my heart, come, now I will test you with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, but surely this also was vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their life. I made my works great. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants, and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and of other provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. Then I turned myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who succeeds the king? Only what he has already done. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I perceive that the same event happens to them all. So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? And then I said in my heart, this also is vanity. For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever. Since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Then I hated all my labor, in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he'll be wise or a fool. Yet he will rule over all my labor, in which I toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Therefore I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. For what has man for all his labor and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful and his work burdensome. Even in the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This I also saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight, but to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity, grasping for the wind. Folly of folly. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, we just come to you tonight as we we break open your word, God, asking you to speak to us. I pray, Lord, that you give me what I'm supposed to say, the power to say it tonight, Lord. Fill me with your Holy Spirit. God, you do all things well, and you brought us here, brought me here, Lord, and I'm just asking that you would speak your message to us tonight, God. We pray it in the name of Jesus. Folly of Folly. So the world's idea of the purpose of life is more stuff, right? We live in a day and age where we have more stuff than we've ever had. I was watching a documentary not a long time ago on the invention of television. And the narrator said the TV was a nifty little invention that gave us a window on the world where we could look out and see all the things that we didn't have. You know, in a way that's true. You know, I grew up, and I'm not really an old man. I mean, I kind of am. You know, just in my day, I can remember the first color television we got. I can remember the first microwave oven we got. I can remember the first dishwasher my mom got. I can remember the first washing machine we got. She always went to wash material, but I remember the first one we actually had in-home washing machine. I can remember the first video game I ever played. Pong. I thought that was the most amazing thing I ever seen in my whole life, man. And I mean, just since me and Lisa got married, when we got married, we didn't have a cell phone. We did, well, we had one car broke down on the honeymoon, but that's another story, right? You've heard that story. I mean, internet, we didn't have, I don't even think, if the internet was a thing, it was just like barely coming in. We didn't have access to it. But you know what? We didn't know we didn't have that stuff. We didn't miss it, right? We have more inventions now, time-saving inventions than we've ever had. Like Lisa and I are watching this documentary series now on the life on the farm during World War II. And all, you know, and they didn't have anything that we had. I mean, wash clothes by hand. I mean, I guess washing machines have been invented, but most people wash clothes by hand. There wasn't no microwave ovens. There wasn't no dishwashers. There wasn't no garbage disposal. We had a garbage disposal when I was a kid. His name was Rover. Anyway, but you know, and we're busier than we've ever been. You talking about all these inventions that's supposed to save us time. All these inventions that's supposed to save a wife and a mom all this time, where she can just sit around working crossword puzzles and eat bonbons. Ladies were busier than we ever been, right? And men, they used to cut logs by hand, but you mowed the grass with the, there wasn't no motorized nothing. You pushed and it spun this blade and cut the grass. We have electric, weed eaters, electric hedge trimmers. Now what am I saying? I don't want to talk fully yours, right? I mean, Solomon hits on something that is great truth here. And obviously he was a man of wisdom because he could figure it out, and the rest of the world seems to not have been able to figure it out. Still can't figure it out. That there's more to life than stuff. That somehow or another, life, the purpose of life has to be more than about stuff. So we're going to look tonight at three great misconceptions of stuff. Three great misconceptions about stuff. First misconception that people have is this: stuff can make me happy. Stuff can make me happy. Solomon said, I'm a very wise man. Probably the wisest man that's ever lived. I tried to find joy and happiness through wisdom, but it left me empty. So now I'm going the other way. And I'm going to try to find happiness through folly. And what that meant to him is stuff. Pleasure and stuff. Any kind of pleasurable experience I can find, that's what I'm going to do. Anything I want, I'm going to just go buy. And Solomon could do it. Solomon had the money to do it. Most of us, we think, would love to be in that situation. If I want something, I'm just going to go buy it. But, Solomon kept his wives locked in another house. So when he wanted to buy something, he just went and did it, right? That's a joke, right? You have to think about that in a minute. So he says, I systematically decided to test out women. And so he said, I tried wine. He doesn't say he was a drunkard, but he certainly didn't mind having a drink if he wanted, he said. I had wine. Women. Oh, Solomon had the women. 700 wives and 300 concubines. 1,000 women to keep up with. And I believe the Bible, and I believe that the Bible is the inspired Word of God, and it says that Solomon was the wisest man. I believe that. But there is a little part of me that goes, how wise could he really have been to try to keep up with 1,000 women? He had it figured out. I mean, he just kept them all locked in their own house. If he wanted one of them, he just sent for them. And when he got tired of talking to her, he sent her back to her house. It was a powerful thing. But, nonetheless, he said, I had, if you think women is what is the answer to happiness, I had that. So, had that. Had gardens. Parks. He said, I made gardens, I made parks, made houses, I had singers, I had slaves, I had silver and gold. Scripture says that silver was counted as nothing in the days of Solomon. It was so plentiful. I mean, it was like rocks in the ground. There was so much silver laying around. He says in verse 8, I acquired special treasures from kings of other provinces. If you read in the account of Solomon in Kings and Chronicles, it talks about Solomon having ships bringing in apes and peacocks. I can remember as a kid reading that, thinking, man, and I completely missed the whole point of Ecclesiastes and the Solomon story, because my thinking is, man, I want to be rich enough one day that I can afford apes and peacocks. I'll have apes and peacocks running around my yard. I still haven't got there yet. I don't know how you go about acquiring apes to run around in your yard. I guess I couldn't buy peacocks, but I decided I don't want them as bad as I thought I did. I had a neighbor one time that had peacocks, and it sounds like a screaming woman. It really, they sound like a screaming woman, and so, if you think just listening to your wife fuss at you is annoying, wait till you get a whole yard full of peacocks screaming at you, right? So I don't have apes or peacocks, but Solomon did. And interestingly enough, he says in verse 9, through all of this, I kept my wisdom. I kept my wisdom through it all. In other words, this was not just reckless debauchery. Solomon says, I had a systematic plan to have it all. I was wise. Even in my folly, I was wise. Even in my foolishness, I was wise. I kept my wisdom. I had a systematic plan to have it all. Solomon said I was going to have my cake and eat it too. I was going to have everything that the world afforded. I was going to enjoy that pleasure, but I was still going to be smart about it. I wasn't going to be like the foolish ones who just squander everything they have. I was going to be smart about it. You see, I was going to have it all. I was going to be that guy that at the end of the game I had all the toys. And at the end of it, verse 11, it said, I looked at all the works my hands had done. And it was all vanity, like trying to grab a hold of the wind. Emptiness, that's what that word means. Futile. Emptiness. It was all meaningless. It was all without purpose. Solomon said, I tried to find happiness in stuff, but it was all, at the end of the day, I had it all. I had everything a man could want, and at the end of the day, I still wasn't happy. My boys grew up watching VeggieTales. So I'm quite schooled in the theology of VeggieTales, and I'm sure I've seen every VeggieTale that's come out, at least, unless it's one that's come out very recently. And at one point, I probably owned or still own a VHS/DVD copy of that. But one of my favorite ones was, it featured a character named Madame Blueberry. Now, Madame Blueberry was out to try to find happiness because she had a sad heart. And the one thing that she wanted more than anything else was a happy heart. Now, it just so happened that just down the street from Madame Blueberry, this new shopping mall moved into town called the Stuff Mart. Pretty clever, right? The Stuff Mart. And they even had this little jingle. I can't do it. They listed off everything really quickly. My mouth doesn't move that fast. But anyway, the little jingle that says, "Happiness waits at the Stuff Mart. All you need is lots more stuff." Which is the world's philosophy, is it not? Happiness waits at the Stuff Mart. If I can just have more stuff, then I'll be happy. And there's a scene in which Madame Blueberry is going aisle to aisle. And she's asking every clerk, which aisle is the happy hearts on? And they all just look at her like she's nuts. We have all this stuff here. Yeah, but which aisle do you keep the happy hearts on? The one thing Madame Blueberry wanted was the one thing that the Stuff Mart couldn't provide, and that's a happy heart. The one thing that Solomon wanted was a happy heart. He had the wisdom, he had the money, he had the women, he had the wine, he had special treasures. He had everything a man could want, except the one thing that he wanted that he couldn't get from any of that was a happy heart. Stuff can't make me happy. Second misconception about stuff is stuff can change my destiny. Stuff can change my destiny. I've often said, or heard it said, when someone comes into a large sum of money, that's life-changing. That's a life-changing amount of money. And, a lot of times they'll be interview news or whoever will interview somebody who's won the lottery. They've got all these billions of dollars. And they'll say, well, that's going to be life-changing for this family. Well, it usually is. It changes it for the better. Have you ever seen those stories of people who won the lottery? 9 times out of 10, they're far more miserable after they won the lottery than before they won it. Solomon here says in verse 13, I saw that wisdom excels folly, like light excels darkness. I learned something through the midst of my organized craziness, that's what he basically says it is. I was going through organized craziness. But I was at least wise enough through it all to understand that wisdom is better than foolishness. Just like light is better than darkness. And yet, he says in verse 14, yet I also realize that the same fate seems to happen to the wise and the fool. Wise man dies just like the fool dies. So neither wisdom nor folly can solve man's greatest riddle, which is, how do I escape death? How do I survive this life? Now we know, we can say, well, it has to do with a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Solomon still trying to figure all that out. For one thing, Jesus Christ hadn't been born yet. He had the Old Testament law. He already was wise enough to figure out he was doing a terrible job of keeping that. He had wisdom to know I'm going to die one day, but he couldn't quite figure out, how do I escape that? And so he thought, it's better to be wise than to be foolish, obviously, and yet both wise and fool are going to die one day. He says basically, what is my wisdom got me? And his answer is, it's got me stuff. Now, he uses wisdom here a little differently than you and I would use it. Because in the classical biblical sense of wisdom, it's knowledge that is godly knowledge that's applied to everyday life. Proverbs says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. When he uses the term here, he's not using it like that. He's using it more in the sense of shrewdness. In other words, I was smarter than the average guy. And I could make deals and do trades, and I could acquire this at a good rate and sell it for a higher rate. I could get what I wanted, and I was wise in the sense that I was shrewd. There wasn't really a lot of godliness in that. It was just I used the wisdom that God gave me to get stuff, not to honor God, but to please me. People do that a lot. They take the knowledge and the intelligence that God gives them, and they don't honor God with it. They use it to please themselves. Solomon said, I was wise. I was wiser than anybody. And what it got me was stuff, but at the end of the day, stuff didn't change. Stuff didn't make me happy. Stuff didn't change my life. He said, I realized that my stuff won't get me remembered. And my end will be just like the fool who has nothing. All the stuff that I have. At the end of the day, when I die, what's it going to matter? I'll be no different than the fool who died with nothing. The man with the most toys still dies. And so, Annie says, here's the important. I've worked hard. I've been smart. I've worked hard. I've acquired stuff. I've got all of this stuff. All of these treasures I've been able to acquire. And when I die, it's going to somebody else. It's going to somebody that's going to inherit it or take it over. And who knows what kind of knucklehead they'll be. And that's pretty much what Solomon said. Who knows if they'll be wise or a fool. I could work my whole life trying to get ahead, trying to have something, trying to accomplish something. And then I die, and it goes to my boys. And you know what knuckleheads they are. And in just a little bit, they'll have all my treasures spent up, right? That's kind of what Solomon is saying there. Therefore, and in verse 17, he comes to this conclusion. Now remember, he's tried stuff to make him happy. He's tried stuff to change his life. And in 17, he says this, therefore I hated my life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. All is vanity, all is meaningless, purposeless, grasping for the wind. He's got everything. Everything the world says a man could want. And he said, I hated my life. He went on one experiment to try to find out the purpose of life, what it takes to bring about happiness. And at the end of his experiment, he said, I hated my life. Whatever the secret to life is, he hasn't found it at this point, apparently. Stuff can't really change your destiny either. So, when I was probably about 21 years old. I was a business major in college. That's when I got my undergraduate in before I went to seminary. And so I got a lot of economics classes and stuff. And my family always got together, like at my mom and dad's house on Sunday night. So, and it would be like me and my parents and my brother-in-law and sister and all their kids, and which would be my nieces and nephews, and it was a standard Sunday night thing. And so to make conversation, my brother-in-law was one of these guys that always cried hard. Always, this came hard to get ahead, can't pay the bill, blah, 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 going through the whole, You just hear it all the time, you know. And so he's like, well, I would just like to get my hands on, you know, some money and where I can just get ahead a little bit, and then I can be all right, then I can make it. And I said, of course, you know, I'm 21, I'm young and dumb, right? I mean, I don't know, I didn't know then that you don't answer a fool in this folly. You don't respond to that kind of conversation. But I said, well, you know, I was actually in an economics class last week, and the professor was saying that there's a theory in economics that if you took all the money in the world and you divided it up equally among every person in the world the same amount of money, within roughly 5 years, with very few exceptions, those people who are rich now will be rich then. And those people who are poor now will be poor then. And he said, well, I'll tell you one thing, I'd sure like to have a chance at it. And I realized, being even 21 and dumb as I was, I realized that this is a conversation that I need to end right now. That my brother-in-law could care less what my economics professor has to say, or I have to say, and so I just dropped it. Now, the interesting part of that story is that a few years later, it wasn't a long time later, I guess me and Lisa were married at the time, so maybe it was 10 years later. I don't know. It wasn't. As I look back on history, it wasn't a long time, but maybe it was 10 years. They came into some money, like a whole lot of money. Like they won a settlement, and I can't really get into the details of why and how and what and all that. And you know, it's one of those non-disclosure things, so you never really knew exactly how much money it was, but it was around $1 million. Now, $1 million is a lot of money in today's dollars. And back then, it was even more money. For poor folks like us, $1 million, I mean, you're almost a millionaire with $1 million, right? So, man, they were spending that money like it's coming out of a pipe, you know. New car, my sister got a new car every 6 months. They went in, they moved out of their little, 2-bedroom cabin in Maypearl, Texas, to a mansion out in the country on about 10 or 15 acres worth of land, paid for it in cash. The realtor said, how do you plan on paying for this? My brother-in-law said, it's like you pay for a Coca-Cola. It was right at 5 years that they had spent every bit of that money. And my sister was rolling pennies to have money to buy groceries. It didn't change their life. Oh, they had stuff for a little while until the money run out. They got more money today than I did. I never had $1 million. It doesn't change your life. Stuff don't change your life unless it changes it for the worse. The other misconception is stuff can give me security. Stuff can give me security. If I can just have enough stuff, then I won't have to worry about the future. And I'm already into that thing, look at it, you go in every once in a while, you check your retirement account. You get your little Social Security statement, We're sorry, by the time you get to be old enough to draw Social Security, it won't exist anymore. That's what my statements say. And, it's kind of fun to think, oh, well, maybe one day, we might actually have the money to retire, but at the end of the day, that can't, some nut can fly a plane into a building in New York, and it can fall away just like that. And either God's going to take care of it, or He's not. And He can't really bring you security. In verse 18, Solomon says, I can't control my stuff, I have to leave it to another. I'm not in control of my stuff anyway. He says in verse 21, I work and I toil. And in verse 23, he says, it's sorrowful and burdensome. He wasn't really enjoying what he was doing. What's the whole deal of, enjoy what you do for a living and you'll never work a day in your life. Well, he was working. He wasn't enjoying what he was doing. He had all this stuff, but he really wasn't enjoying life. He says in verse 21, at the end of the day, when I die, I have to leave my stuff for another one who did nothing to earn it. And who knows what kind of a nut he'll be. That's my paraphrase of what Solomon says there, but that's basically what he said. And his conclusion is this, in verses 24 to 26. Enjoy what God gives you. Because only in God does one find happiness. Look what he says. He says, nothing is better. I'm in 24. Nothing is better for a man than he should eat and drink and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. In other words, if God blesses you with something, enjoy it. He give it to you. Who can eat or who can have enjoyment more than I? He said, man, I ought to be enjoying life more than anybody. I have more than anybody. But he had just said, I'm miserable. I hate life. God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight, but to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting that he may give to him who is good before God. Here, Solomon is getting there. He's on to something. He ain't quite got it all figured out by chapter 2. He'll have it by the end of the book. But he's figured this out. That life seems to go better for those that are serving God. He's figured that much out. That they're able, something about when a man is serving God, that he's able to enjoy the blessings that God gives him. And that when a man is serving God, his work doesn't seem burdensome to him. And the blessings that he gets, God gives him what he needs. And yet when a man is trying to serve himself, all the work that he does seems to be burdensome. And no matter how much stuff he's got, it never seems to be enough. So he's on to something there. Only in God does one find happiness and purpose in life. When I surrendered to the ministry, I was at a job working at a bank in my hometown, worked full time. I got off work at 4 o'clock in the evening. I would get in my car and I would drive an hour to Fort Worth to go take night classes at seminary, and I would be there, and my seminary classes were from 6 to 9. I would come home. I would get home about 10. I would eat something, which I know they say that's the worst time in the night to eat something, but if you're hungry, you're going to eat. And that's what I did. Eat something, go to bed, get up, be back at work by 8 o'clock the next morning. I did that every day. And then except Wednesdays, I led a youth group at my home church. So I was a youth minister. I was a volunteer youth minister. I was going to seminary an hour away and working full-time at a bank. It was stressful. They were trying to teach me stuff in the bank. And I told the bank president, I said, look, I'm going to be a preacher. I don't really want to learn like all this stuff. I just, I'll sit in the window and count money. I can do that. But he had it, they don't get like guys that come to work at the bank very often. And so when they do, they automatically think vice president, vice president. And so he's trying to teach me on the commercial loans and food stamps and all this stuff. And I'm trying, I can't figure out, okay, how do I debit a food stamp account? And I'm getting that confused with, what did Martin Luther say about, about atonement? And it's just kind of all running in my mind. And I come home for lunch. It was about 15-minute drive home. So, but I was cheap because I was broke, and so I wasn't going to eat out. So I would drive home. And I was driving home, and there was this guy on the side of the road, and he was digging a ditch. And as I recall, he was digging it by hand. But he'd stopped for lunch. He was having his lunch too. He was sitting there eating a bologna sandwich. And I swear, when I saw him, I was jealous of him. I was jealous. Here's this man, all he's got, and this is what went through my mind. I thought, all this man has to worry about. I've got all this stuff to worry about. All this man has to worry about is digging this ditch and eating this bologna sandwich. And I said, man, I wish I could be like him. And God spoke to me during that time, and he said, no, you don't. That's not really what you want to do. But I do want you to remember the lesson of the bologna sandwich. You keep life just as simple as you can. The less stuff you can clutter your life with, the happier you'll be. The less stresses in your life you can have, the happier you'll be. So, no, you don't want to dig ditches for a living, Mark. I promise you that. But remember the lesson of the bologna sandwich. It's very hard sometimes for a preacher to have a stress-free life. But I think there's wisdom in that for all of us, and I think that's what Solomon is saying here. If we could get away from the stresses of life. Now, what does the world say? Stuff can make me happy. Jesus tells a story about a man who had so much stuff that he ran out of space in his barns. He said, what will I do? I'll tear down my barns and build bigger barns. Jesus called him a fool and said his soul would be required of him that night. The world says stuff can change my destiny. We're told in the New Testament about the rich young ruler that comes to Jesus wanting to know, what must I do to be saved? Oh, you know the commandments. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery. He says, yeah, I've done all that. What do I still like? Jesus said, one thing you like. Sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and you'll have riches in heaven. And it says he went away sorrowful because he was very rich. Stuff can give me security. Jesus said, don't store up treasures on this earth where they can rust and decay, but rather store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, which neither moth nor rust destroy, nor thieves may break in and steal. George Beverly Shea, when he was confronted by Billy Graham about coming on tour with him on these crusades, it would mean he would give up an already lucrative recording contract that he had. He was in a bit of a crisis of faith. What should he do? What would he do? He went home and he sat down and he penned the words of this song. I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be his than have riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or lands. I'd rather be led by his nail-pierced hand than to be the king of a vast domain or be held in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. That's your prayer today. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word, how you do speak to us. Lord, thank you for the truth. It's not stuff that makes us happy. It's not pleasure that makes us happy, but a relationship with you. Lord, be with us now in this invitation time. Speak to our hearts, Lord.